Humphrey Bogart entered the history of American cinema as an icon that needs no long introduction. The hat pulled low, the half-burned cigarette, the weary eyes that never quite surrendered. He was not a radiant hero, nor was he an easy man to like. Bogart brought to the screen a completely different kind of masculinity. Cold, fractured, scarred, and it was precisely this quality that made an entire generation unable to look away. Yet behind that air of indifference lay a life constantly stretched between two opposing poles. Talent came late. Success arrived only after decades of being underestimated. Bogart had to endure minor roles and years of being typecast as a second-rate criminal before becoming the face that defined an entire cinematic era. And when fame finally erupted, it did not bring peace. It brought pressure, alcohol, failed marriages, and an inner world that grew increasingly sealed off. Bogart was famous for his restraint on screen, but in real life he was a man of deep contradictions. Loyal yet hot-tempered, principled yet easily wounded, contemptuous of the studio system, yet never truly free from it. Iconic performances like Casablanca and the Maltese Falcon were not merely acts of performance. They were closer to indirect confessions, the voice of a man locked in combat with himself. So how much did he have to pay to hold on to that image until his final breath? That image of the hard-edged man, tightly sealed off from emotion, did not form by accident. It was forged very early, in an environment that appeared privileged, yet lacked the one thing that mattered most: human closeness. Humphrey DeForest Bogart was born on December 25, 1899 in New York, into a family of the intellectual upper class. On the surface, it was a starting point many would envy. His father was a renowned heart surgeon, his mother a prominent illustrator actively involved in the feminist movement. But behind those achievements lay a cold household where professional success consistently took precedence over a child's emotional needs. Bogart grew up at a distance. His father was addicted to morphine, authoritative yet remote. His mother, despite her talent and independence, was known for her severity, emotional restraint, and a near absence of tenderness toward her son. Prestigious preparatory schools and expectations that he would pursue medicine or law did not give Bogart a sense of security. They only intensified the pressure to be proper. In a family that treated discipline and status as measures of worth, the young Bogart learned early to build a defensive shell: silence, sarcasm, and an aversion to showing weakness. World War I pulled him off the path laid out for him. Enlisting in the Navy was not a romantic act of heroism, but an escape from rigid family molds. When the war ended, Bogart returned disoriented, without a clear purpose, no longer convinced that a right path truly existed for him. In that void, the theater emerged as an option no one expected, least of all Bogart himself. Yet it opened the only space where he could exist without having to explain himself or please anyone else. From that sideways turn, Bogart's professional path did not open under bright lights, but through narrow doors and roles so modest they were easy to overlook. In the early 1920s, he entered the world of Broadway not as a star, but behind the scenes, working as a stage manager, running errands, learning to observe the breathing rhythm of a play from the margins. And when he was given the chance to step on stage, it was usually in fleeting supporting roles, sometimes with only a single line, brief enough for audiences to forget as soon as the lights went down. Yet in those scant moments, Bogart learned what would later become his distinctive weapon: say little, keep the rhythm, and let silence carry weight. The 1920s passed in a patience that was almost mute. He did not have the look of a classic leading man, no dazzling smile, no easily accessible romantic charm. Producers looked at him and saw only a face that was hard to sell, too jagged for love, too cold for mass sympathy. While many contemporaries advanced quickly, Bogart remained trapped in a loop of nameless roles, surviving on the stage without recognition. That disregard did not make him explode. It drove him further inward, storing energy in a quiet, enduring way. Attention came late, and in an unexpected form. In Invitation to a Murder, Bogart did nothing overtly different, but something began to register more clearly, an ability to generate psychological tension without excess gesture. That quality reached its extreme with The Petrified Forest in 1936, and his role as Duke Manty, a dangerous criminal, blunt-spoken, with eyes that always seemed on the verge of violence, was not a leading role in the conventional sense, yet it dominated the space whenever he appeared. 197 consecutive performances honed the character into a dense, compressed force, compelling critics for the first time to admit that Bogart was not merely suited to bad guys, but possessed a rare inner gravity. Hollywood opened its doors soon after, but not the door to glory. A contract with Warner Brothers brought Bogart to the big screen, only to confine him quickly within a new mold. Gangster, criminal, stubborn antagonist. His name appeared regularly on posters. The films earned steady box office returns, but true leading roles remained out of reach. His early years at the major studio were a succession of performances repeating the same type, all while he was acutely aware that he could do more. That contradiction, being constantly employed yet never fully trusted, became a low-burning pressure, feeding bitterness while quietly preparing him for a moment Bogart did not yet know was coming, and that would arrive swiftly enough to alter his place in film history entirely. And that long-simmering pressure finally found a crack to escape through, and when it burst, everything happened almost at once, so rapidly that even Bogart himself had no time to brace for it. High Sierra in 1941 arrived as what seemed like a final test, only to become a complete reversal of fate. For the first time, he was no longer standing behind brighter faces, but carrying an entire film on his shoulders, in the role of Roy Earle, an aging, exhausted criminal who embodies both the pride and the desperation of a man who knows his time is nearly over. Bogart did not play Roy as a purely evil figure. He allowed the contradictions to surface, the wounds compressed beneath a hardened exterior. Audiences were startled to discover that the man who had been typecast for so many years could make a lawbreaker feel pitiable, even unforgettable. The box office exceeded expectations, and the press began speaking his name in a different tone. No longer a familiar face, but a star in the making. Before he could even enjoy that new position, Bogart was thrown headlong into a role even more unforgiving. The Maltese Falcon, also released in 1941, offered him no chance to please anyone. Sam Spade is a professional liar, morally ambiguous, ruthlessly clear-headed, and utterly uninterested in sympathy. And Bogart stepped into the role armed with everything he had accumulated over 2 decades of being underestimated: restraint, the cold gaze, dialogue delivered as sharply as a blade. The character does not explain himself, does not plead his case. Every line feels like the result of a decision weighed long in advance. The film was not only a commercial success, it introduced a new cinematic language, one in which a hero no longer had to be pure to be believed. And Bogart, with his manner both detached and weary, became the ideal face of that kind of anti-hero. What mattered most was that this breakthrough did not bring relief. Success arrived quickly, but pressure followed just as fast. Bogart understood that he had stepped out of the safety zone of supporting roles, meaning that every subsequent appearance now had to carry more weight than the last. Doubt from the studios had not entirely vanished, and he still had to prove that High Sierra and the Maltese Falcon were not accidents. In that brief transitional moment, Bogart was celebrated as a new face of American cinema while privately carrying the fear that a single misstep could push him back into the old mold. That tension, between a summit just reached and the terror of losing everything, gave his on-screen gaze from this point forward the feeling of someone staring directly into a world with no mercy at all. That the momentum had barely begun to cool when Casablanca appeared, quiet during production, yet carrying a low, constant pressure that made even Bogart wary. Rick Blaine is not an easy character to love, cynical, embittered, standing amid war while trying to keep himself outside all ideals. Bogart approached Rick through cold restraint, a man who once believed, once loved, and then chose withdrawal as a means of survival. When the story finally forces Rick to choose, Bogart does not turn the moment into a heroic speech. The sacrifice comes like a decision long since matured, requiring no explanation. That very restraint is what gives the character its weight. Audiences see in Rick not innate nobility, but the cost of returning to responsibility. The role earned Bogart his first Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, yet throughout production, faith in success was nearly non-existent. The script was constantly rewritten, the order of scenes rearranged, no one certain where the emotional landing point would be. Bogart performed in a state of intense focus mixed with doubt, as if each day were a new gamble. When the film was released, the initial response was positive, but not explosive, until, over time, the character's true gravity revealed itself. Box office returns grew steadily, the influence spread, and the image of Rick Blaine became a cultural benchmark. In just 2 years, and the journey from a man deemed unsuitable for leading roles to an A-list star closed in a way few could have predicted. Bogart entered a phase in which every choice was examined under a microscope. Each new role had to preserve the sharp edge of the anti-hero without repeating himself. At Warner Brothers, he became a pillar, not because of glamorous looks, but because he embodied a new kind of cinematic masculinity, weary yet lucid, morally gray yet bounded, imperfect and unapologetic. A punishing production pace, tight shooting schedules, and rising box office expectations forced him to learn how to control his image through acting discipline. Short clip dialogue, eyes that spoke in place of words, emotions always held just at the brink of overflow. That maturity did not come from safety. It was honed in the conflict between studio demands and the instincts of an actor who had waited too long to be trusted, and who now could not allow himself a single misstep ever again. Just as faint openings were beginning to appear in his Broadway career, Humphrey Bogart's emotional life veered into an equally complex direction. In 1922, amid the cramped backstage atmosphere of New York theaters, he met Helen Menken, a stage actress with an established reputation, a strong personality, and far greater experience than a Bogart still struggling between minor roles and backstage work. That imbalance did not create distance at first. On the contrary, it drew them together. Menken saw in Bogart a raw, stubborn, unrefined energy, while Bogart was pulled toward the confidence, boldness, and theatrical vitality of a woman long accustomed to the spotlight. The relationship developed at a time when Bogart was still a nobody in the performing world. He lived from short-term contracts to precarious runs, while Menken continued to land substantial roles. They married on May 20th, 1926, at a moment when Bogart was effectively gambling his entire future on the stage, while Menken was at the height of her desirability. That reversal of power soon seeped into their shared life. Bogart carried the insecurity of a man not yet recognized. Menken bore the pressure of maintaining her position in an environment unforgiving toward forceful, unconventional women. Their clashes stemmed not only from professional differences, but from the ways each confronted their own anxieties. Married life quickly grew tense. Bogart drank more, reacted more sharply, and Menken became increasingly decisive in her choice of roles, including works that were controversial at the time. Distance formed through mismatched performance schedules, late nights, and tempers that flared before either could name them. With no children to anchor them, the relationship eroded rapidly under suspicion, jealousy, and the feeling of being left behind, on both sides, in different ways. Just over a year after the wedding, the marriage ended in divorce on November 18, 1927. Menken went on to face the heavy professional consequences of her daring choices, while Bogart emerged with a deeper fracture in his private life. Precisely as he was about to enter a long stretch of being underestimated and subjected to harsher trials on his acting path. After that brief but violent collapse, Bogart did not retreat from the stage. He immersed himself more deeply in Broadway as a way of maintaining balance. In 1924, during the play Nerves, he met Mary Phillips, an actress grounded by professional discipline and a rare composure. Unlike Menken, Mary did not overwhelm Bogart with her aura. She accompanied him through steady work rhythms, understanding the theater as a craft that demands endurance rather than display. Their closeness grew out of long rehearsals and repetitive runs, where Bogart learned restraint and Mary learned to place her trust in a man slowly laying his foundations. Their relationship deepened during a period when Bogart was still regarded as an actor unsuited for leading roles. Mary accepted a quieter life centered on New York theater. Bogart, at that point, had not yet imagined Hollywood as a destination. They married on April 3, 1928, beginning a decade of relatively subdued life together. In a small apartment and through consecutive seasons, they shared the rhythms of the theatrical world, rehearsing, waiting, rehearsing again. That stability allowed Bogart to survive years of disregard, while Mary preserved the professional space she knew best. Pressure began to mount when cinema called Bogart's name. Sporadic film contracts in the early 1930s pulled him away from New York in intervals, while Mary had no reason to leave Broadway, where she had built her standing. Geographic distance turned into a divergence of daily rhythms. Bogart longed to escape the cycle of minor stage roles through opportunities before the camera. Mary needed the continuity of the theater to remain herself. Brief reunions, misaligned schedules, and expectations pulling in different directions gradually thinned their intimacy. By 1938, when Bogart decided to move permanently to California to pursue film work, the choice confirmed what had long been simmering beneath the surface. Their paths no longer intersected. The divorce was finalized that year, quietly, without scandal, closing the relationship with mutual respect. Bogart entered Hollywood carrying with him the discipline of the stage and a private life pared down to near emptiness. Mary remained in New York, holding fast to her familiar world. That emptiness was quickly filled by the punishing pace of studio work, and also laid the groundwork for even more violent collisions in the next chapter of his emotional life. As Hollywood gradually opened its doors to him, the void in Humphrey Bogart's private life could no longer be masked by the discipline of the stage. It was laid bare amid long shooting days and nights strung together by alcohol. In that setting, Bogart met Mayo Methot, a woman of ferocious magnetism, volatile emotion, and a history of deep trauma. They crossed paths in the late 1930s when Bogart was struggling to prove he was more than a typecast supporting player, while Methot moved through the world already fractured. The attraction came quickly and carried a sense of inevitability. Two people long accustomed to insecurity, both reacting intensely to the fear of abandonment, finding in each other an amplified mirror. They married on August 21st, 1938. A married life opened with the frantic rhythm of film sets and evenings that stretched deep into drink. Emotional intensity turned every minor disagreement into a storm. Bogart, at a stage when studios relied on him as a dependable gangster, felt the pressure to project toughness. Methot, carrying instability and jealousy, responded with eruptions. Arguments spilled beyond the home into public view, earning them a nickname from friends and colleagues that mixed irony with dread. Violence was no longer a vague rumor. Bruises, shattered furniture, and nights in hospitals became a dark underside that everyone knew about, though few dared to confront. Work did nothing to soothe their life together. If anything, each new success for Bogart poured fuel on the fire of suspicion. Methot sank deeper into psychological turmoil, at one point reaching a nadir in a self-destructive attempt that stunned those around her. Bogart tried to salvage the marriage by pushing for treatment, but that effort collided with the harsh reality of two personalities no longer able to control one another. The home ceased to be a place of rest. It became a battleground of exhaustion, fear, and endless accusation. By 1945, as Bogart stood on the brink of stardom and understood that his private life was dragging him away from any stable footing, the bond ended in divorce. No children, no peace to hold them together, only the shards of a relationship sustained by intensity rather than care. See, he emerged from that violent entanglement with deeper psychological scars, scars that would make any gentleness to come both deeply desired and deeply suspected, just as a very young face entered the frame and altered the remaining course of his life. That wound had barely begun to heal when a very young face appeared before the camera, carrying a composure that did not belong to 19 years. In 1944, while preparing to Have and Have Not, Bogart met Lauren Bacall, a newcomer to Hollywood, unburdened by history and not yet trained to fear the gaze of power. On set, Bacall did not rush to claim space or try to be likable. She stood still, kept her gaze steady, spoke little but with exact timing. It did not make Bogart feel challenged. It created a rare quiet. After years of living amid conflict, he realized for the first time that he did not need to be on guard with a woman. Bacall's calm was not naive innocence, but the result of self-command, the kind of inner discipline Bogart had always lacked and always sought. A long shooting days became a time when the two learned to exist beside each other without performing. Bogart, at the height of fame after Casablanca, carried the accumulated fatigue of a man newly recognized yet unable to adapt to always having to be on. Bacall entered that space like a different kind of breath. Less noise, more choice, no demand that he become better or stronger. Closeness grew out of silences, moments when his quiet was not mistaken for coldness, when she stood firm under pressure without leaning on anyone. On screen, their chemistry came from restraint. Off-screen, it came from mutual respect for boundaries. The relationship moved quickly while Bogart's old wreckage was still present. A 25-year age gap kept the public whispering, yet internally that difference created a peculiar balance. Bacall did not need Bogart to prove power or experience. Bogart did not need Bacall to prove submission or innocence. They married on May 21, 1945, with an unspoken agreement. Private life would not become a stage. In a Hollywood addicted to display, they chose a guarded routine. Few parties, much discipline. On film, they continued working together with cool precision. In life, they placed order ahead of impulsive feeling, a choice driven more by self-preservation than romance. A family took shape amid dense shooting schedules and long trips. In 1949, their son Stephen was born. In 1952, their daughter Leslie followed. Bogart inhabited fatherhood quietly, avoiding display, refusing to turn his children into extensions of a public image. Bacall set the household rhythm, actively trimming unnecessary friction with party life. Conflict did not disappear. Bogart's fame brought temptation and pressure. Old habits left marks on health and spirit. Bacall learned to stand firm between two roles, partner and guardian of their shared tempo. These tensions did not explode. They lingered as accumulated fatigue, managed through agreements, pauses, and the deliberate choice of silence at the right moments to keep that fragile structure from collapsing. The stability that Bogart and Bacall tried to construct did not soothe the darkness inside him. It only drove that darkness deeper, sharpening its edges. In 1950, In a Lonely Place emerged as an unforgiving mirror. The character Dixon Steele carries a smoldering rage, constant suspicion, and an insecurity ready to erupt, traits that require no cosmetic exaggeration to surface on Bogart's face. He does not play inner violence. He lets it seep out through his breathing, through eyes perpetually poised to strike back, through silences stretched beyond what feels safe. The role both pulled audiences in and pushed them away, while professionals recognized that this was not a polished image designed to sell tickets, but a risk, exposing his own compressed inner life on screen. The film was not a loud box office explosion, yet its psychological weight endured, ushering Bogart into a phase of acting in which every role could wound the performer, and he accepted that price. Before that pressure could ease, the African Queen tore him from familiar spaces and placed him in a rare test of both body and spirit. Charlie Allnut is no elegant gentleman. He is a coarse, drunken boat captain, awkward before responsibility, forced to learn maturity under brutal conditions. Bogart transforms roughness into dry humor, then pivots toward a belated courage, a journey requiring him to lighten himself while retaining moral weight. The punishing shoot drained his strength. Long days in oppressive climates, relentless schedules, compounded by old habits that made the body respond unmistakably. On screen, that effort becomes a truth that isn't smooth. Audiences see sweat, fatigue, a human being pushed to the limit. When his name was called for the Best Actor Oscar, it marked an indisputable professional summit, a late but deserved acknowledgement of a long journey from doubt to icon. Yet the glory carried a cost he could not hide. The body began to rebel against accumulated rhythms and habits, while the mind bore the burden of always going to the edge with every role. Fame reached its peak, but the energy to sustain it was no longer infinite. Bogart moved through the early 1950s with unimpeachable stature and a body that increasingly spoke up, each subsequent role bearing the imprint of controlled exhaustion, taut as a violin string, waiting for a single slack moment to reveal everything. That taut string did not snap at once. It pulled Bogart toward roles demanding an age beyond his years. In 1954, Sabrina placed him as a man past the era of display, closed off, controlled, accustomed to deciding by reason rather than feeling. Before the camera, Bogart does not compete with youth. He builds weight through restraint, through a gaze that has seen enough to need no proof. The character does not seek romance. He reveals the loneliness of power and the dryness of ingrained habit, a complexity that makes the role both difficult to approach and enduring. Public reaction split. Some waited for familiar warmth. Others recognized a quiet advance, where attraction comes from ripeness. That same year, the Caine Mutiny pushed him to another extreme. The tension of discipline, fear legalized as authority. The commanding officer Bogart portrays need not shout to impose himself. Instability shows in his rigid grip on rules, in panic masked by sternness. The role demands exquisite control of tempo, enough for audiences to believe in authority, yet enough fissure to glimpse fracture. Critics praised the film, awarding major nominations, and Bogart demonstrated his willingness to inhabit a gray zone where the trustworthy and the terrifying coexist. Off-screen, pace and fame no longer aligned smoothly. Alcohol appeared as a temporary crutch, helping him endure long shooting days, charging interest in compounded fatigue. Clashes with studios increased as Bogart refused to accept being boxed into one-dimensional roles. He argued over scripts, motivations, editing rhythms, not out of rebellion, but because he could not tolerate the simplification of what he had paid so dearly to understand. The body sent warning signals, the mind grew harder, and his relationship with the studio system shifted from obedience to tense negotiation. On screen, roles thickened with layers. Behind it all, the cost of maintaining autonomy became visible by the day, turning each next step into both a career choice and a struggle with the limits of his own endurance. Those tensions did not remain confined to film sets. They spilled into the civic life of a star forced to choose between conscience and safety. In 1947, Bogart appeared publicly among a group of Hollywood figures opposing the HUAC hearings, standing with those who viewed the communist witch hunts as a direct threat to creative freedom. The decision did not carry the posture of a professional political warrior. It sprang from the instinct of a man who hated being coerced and understood all too well the price of silence. Pressure descended quickly. From studios, from the press, from the fear of being blacklisted. Bogart retreated, publicly softening his stance to preserve himself, and that very retreat drew fire from both sides. Those who had stood with him felt betrayed, while opponents branded him a compromiser, and the contradiction cut deep, thickening the layer of suspicion that had already become his survival instinct. In daily life, his circle of friends narrowed. Bogart did not seek crowds. He chose a few faces he trusted enough to share silence rather than advice. Irony became a shield, sharp, effective, but wounding to anyone who stood too close. Behind the dry jokes lay a fear of being touched, the fatigue of a man who had spent a lifetime controlling image and emotion. Solitude was not a romantic choice. It was the consequence of years spent learning not to need anyone, until the ability to need was forgotten altogether. Meanwhile, the body refused to honor the old bargain. Decades of smoking and drinking to endure punishing schedules and inner conflict began to send the bill. When a diagnosis of esophageal cancer was confirmed, extreme measures became the only option. Major surgery removed part of the esophagus, leaving a body emaciated, a weight dropping to around 80 pounds, a figure that needs no embellishment to shock. Recovery stretched through pain and exhaustion, where fame offered no anesthetic and endurance came solely from the will to survive. During that time, Bacall stayed close, providing a steadying rhythm for everything coming undone. The illness did not strike without warning. It revealed itself through signs Bogart had long learned to dismiss. A persistent cough, growing difficulty eating, stamina falling sharply after each shooting day. Once esophageal cancer was confirmed, the only choice was a brutally radical operation. Most of the esophagus removed along with lymph nodes, a procedure lasting many hours that pushed an already weary body into an unprecedented fragility. Recovery carried no heroic glow. It was a sequence of painful days, feeding tubes, uncontrolled weight loss, each step exacting a toll of exhaustion. Fame could no longer conceal the truth of the body. Habits sustained over decades, cigarettes, alcohol, now stood as visible burdens. A body weight fell to a critical level, hovering near 80 pounds. The face grew gaunt, the eyes remained alert, but strength steadily drained away. Subsequent treatments aimed less at cure than at slowing progression, extending time rather than promising recovery. Rare good days were measured by the ability to sit up, speak a few words, hold a stretch of time without pain. Bacall organized life around that fragile breathing, limiting visitors, controlling information, shielding the home from public curiosity. Her presence was not loud. It lived in the careful arrangement of small details, so Bogart would not have to perform any role at all. He remained lucid until the final days, recognizing the limits of his body with the same directness he had brought to his roles, without grandstanding, without evasion. On January 14, 1957, Bogart died at the age of 57. There was no triumphant closing moment to resolve the contradictions that had followed him throughout life, political, institutional, physical. The ending preserved those paradoxes intact. The enduring, cool persona, built from discipline and restraint, paid for with years of self-erosion. In the final silence, no role stepped in to bear the weight. There was only a man who had gone to the end of his choices, with Bacall beside him, bearing witness to the true cost of fame. After Bogart exited the stage of real life, what remained was not a sealed image or an easy label. His legacy does not rest on the number of awards, though the Oscar for the African Queen still stands as an undeniable marker, but on how he reshaped the emotional language of American cinema. Before Bogart, and the leading man was often built as a safe anchor, strong, legible, morally unwavering. After Bogart, the man on screen could be tired, hesitant, skeptical, even flawed, and still retain central gravity. He cleared a path for a kind of hero who does not prevail through strength or promises, but through the ability to endure his own contradictions. Characters like Sam Spade, Rick Blaine, Dixon Steele, and Charlie Allnut continue to live on because they are not frozen in their era. They carry a post-war sensibility, a distrust of authority, the fatigue of a man who has seen too much yet is still forced to choose. Film noir is not merely light and shadow. It is a state of mind, and Bogart became the default face of that state. Later generations, from American cinema to Europe, have repeatedly borrowed that rhythm whenever they sought to tell the story of a man who is imperfect, yet refuses to evade responsibility. In private life, the legacy was preserved more quietly. Lauren Bacall did not turn memory into cheap mythology. She protected it through restraint. Their two children grew up outside the center of the spotlight, at allowing the name Bogart to exist first as family memory before cultural symbol. Honors, film retrospectives, and later commemorations have all returned to the same axis. Not how great Bogart was, but how he changed the way we look at human beings. When his lines are still quoted, when the silent stance with an unlit cigarette still carries more weight than any climax, it points to a simple truth. Humphrey Bogart is not immortal because he was perfect. He endures because he allowed imperfection to exist honestly on screen. And, perhaps, that honesty, paid for with a lifetime of self-conflict, is the most durable legacy he left to cinema and to those who once recognized themselves in that weary yet unyielding gaze. Humphrey Bogart closed his story not with completeness, but with the weight of what continues to echo. He left behind a different standard for film. Silence can speak louder than dialogue, fatigue can still carry dignity, and strength need not be displayed to be trusted. And that image survives because it touches a part of humanity that every era recognizes, the part that must choose when nothing is perfect. If this journey made you pause at a moment, a look or a feeling uniquely your own, write it down in the comments so the conversation can widen. Click like if you believe the story deserves to travel further, share it so lovers of classic cinema can find one another, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next portraits, where fame and private life collide, leaving marks that cannot be erased.